The orchard stopped bearing fruit the summer Jacob disappeared, 27 years ago when he was 8 and his sister Mara was 12. And though the trees never died, their branches still reaching toward the sky in gnarled supplication, their roots still drinking from the Connecticut soil, they never bloomed again, as if something in them had broken the same moment Jacob had walked between the rows of apple trees on an August afternoon and simply never come back. The police searched for weeks. Volunteers combed every inch of the property and the woods beyond, but it was as though the earth had opened and swallowed him whole. And eventually the searches stopped and the theories faded, and the Brennan family was left with an orchard full of skeletal trees and a silence so profound it felt like suffocation. Now Mara stood at the edge of that same orchard on an October morning that tasted like memory and regret, watching fog curl through the twisted branches, and she could feel it pulling at her the way it had always pulled. This place that had taken her brother. This place she'd spent nearly 3 decades avoiding. This place she'd inherited when her mother died 3 months ago with instructions in the will that made Mara's blood run cold. The orchard must be kept. Someone must watch. Someone must remember what we tried to forget. And beneath that, in her mother's shaking handwriting, 3 words that Mara couldn't stop thinking about. He's still waiting. Mara Brennan was 39 years old, a graphic designer living in Boston, divorced with no children, living a carefully constructed life that had one foundational rule: never think about the orchard, never think about Jacob, never go back to the house on Millbrook Road. She'd maintained that rule successfully for 27 years, visiting her mother in restaurants or hotels, but never the family home, making excuses that became so routine no one questioned them anymore. But death doesn't care about your rules. Death forces you to face exactly what you've been running from. The house was as she remembered it. A white farmhouse built in 1847, 3 bedrooms upstairs, and a kitchen that still smelled like the cinnamon her mother had used to bake pies back when she still baked, back when she still pretended everything was normal. Behind the house, the orchard spread across 5 acres, 200 apple trees, arranged in perfect rows, a small family business that had sustained 4 generations of Brennans until the summer of 1998, when the trees had stopped producing and the family had stopped being a family. Mara had arrived yesterday, had spent the night in her childhood bedroom with its faded wallpaper and the view of the orchard she'd deliberately not looked at. Now, standing in the morning light with coffee cooling in her hands, she couldn't avoid it any longer. The orchard called to her. It had always called to her. She walked across the overgrown lawn, past the garden where her mother had once grown vegetables, to the edge where manicured grass met wild earth. A wooden sign, weathered and barely legible, marked the boundary. Brennan Family Orchard, since 1920. The trees beyond were wrong in ways Mara couldn't quite articulate. They weren't dead. She could see sap beneath peeling bark, could see green beneath gray, but they weren't alive either. They existed in suspension, in waiting, in that liminal space between death and life, where ghosts supposedly dwell. "You're here." Mara spun around. An elderly woman stood at the edge of the property, silver hair pulled into a bun, leaning on a cane. Mrs. Chen from next door. Older now, frailer, but still recognizable. "Mrs. Chen, I didn't see you there." "Most people don't anymore. I've become like the orchard, visible but not quite present." She moved closer, her cane making soft sounds on the grass. "Your mother told me you'd come back eventually. She said the orchard wouldn't let you stay away forever." "The orchard is just trees." "Is it?" Mrs. Chen looked past Mara to the twisted branches. "I was here the day Jacob disappeared. I saw him walk into the trees. I saw you follow him 5 minutes later, and I saw you come back alone." Mara felt ice in her veins. "I was 12. I don't remember much from that day. Don't you? Or have you worked very hard not to remember?" What are you saying? Mrs. Chen was quiet for a moment, studying Mara with eyes that held too much knowledge. Your mother came to me 6 months ago. She was dying. She knew it, and she needed to tell someone the truth. She made me promise to tell you when you came back. Tell me what? That Jacob didn't disappear, that he was taken, and that you were there when it happened. The world tilted. Mara gripped her coffee mug to keep from falling. That's not true. I didn't see. Your mother said you'd say that. She said the orchard took your memory along with your brother, but she also said the memory was still there, buried, waiting, and that when you came back, when you really looked at the trees, you'd start to remember. Mrs. Chen turned and walked away, leaving Mara alone with the orchard and implications she couldn't process. Mara went back inside the house and spent the day avoiding the windows that faced the orchard. She sorted through her mother's belongings mechanically. Clothes to donate, papers to file, photographs to... She couldn't decide what to do with the photographs. So many pictures of Jacob, 8 years old forever, gap-toothed smile, cowlick that never stayed down, holding apples from the orchard in a basket bigger than he was, and pictures of Mara at 12 before. She looked different in the photos from before that August. Happier, lighter, like a person who hadn't yet learned what loss really meant. The photos from after showed someone harder, older, a girl who'd aged decades in a single afternoon. What had happened in the orchard? Mara tried to remember. She had fragments, Jacob calling her name, telling her to come see something cool. The smell of apples, even though it was too early for harvest. Walking between the rows of trees, their branches seeming to close overhead like a tunnel. Jacob ahead of her, his red t-shirt bright against the green. And then, nothing. A blank space. The next memory was her mother screaming, police arriving, people asking her questions she couldn't answer because she genuinely didn't know. Where had Jacob gone? What had she seen? Why had she come back without him? I don't remember, she'd said then, and had been saying ever since. And she'd believed it was true. But Mrs. Chen was right. Mara had worked hard not to remember. She could feel it now. That deliberate forgetting, that conscious choice to bury whatever had happened in the orchard, along with the hope of ever seeing Jacob again. That night, Mara dreamed of the trees. She was 12 again, following Jacob into the orchard, and the trees were alive in ways they weren't supposed to be. Their branches moved without wind, reaching toward Jacob, curling around him like hands. And Jacob was laughing, not afraid, like he knew them, like they were friends. "Come see, Mara," he called. "They want to show me something." "Jacob, come back," Dream Mara called, but her voice didn't work right, came out muffled and distant. Jacob walked deeper into the orchard, and the trees closed around him, their branches weaving together into a wall of wood and leaves. Mara ran toward him, but the trees blocked her, pushed her back, and she heard Jacob's voice one more time. "It's okay, Mara. They just want to keep me. They need someone to stay, to remember, to grow." Mara woke gasping, her heart hammering. The clock read 3:47 a.m. Outside her window, the orchard stood in moonlight, and Mara could swear the trees had moved closer to the house while she slept. She got up and went downstairs, drawn by the same compulsion that had pulled her across the lawn that morning. But this time she didn't stop at the edge. This time she walked into the orchard. The moment she crossed the boundary, everything changed. The air grew colder, heavier, textured with something she couldn't name. The trees that had seemed dead in daylight were alive at night, sap flowing, branches swaying, leaves rustling though there was no breeze. And between the rustles, she heard whispers. Mara, her name spoken by a voice she'd know anywhere, a voice she'd been hearing in her dreams for 27 years. "Jacob? You came back. I knew you would. You had to, eventually." Mara spun around trying to locate the source of the voice. It seemed to come from everywhere, and nowhere from the trees themselves, from the earth beneath her feet. "Where are you?" "Here. I've always been here," In the orchard, in the trees, in the ground. That's not possible. You disappeared. You're gone. I didn't disappear. I stayed. They needed someone to stay. Who needed someone? The trees. The orchard. It was dying, Mara. Dad had sprayed chemicals, had poisoned the soil trying to make the harvest bigger, and the trees were dying. They needed someone to heal them. Someone young, with years ahead of them. Someone who belonged to the orchard. Mara felt dizzy. Jacob, you're not making sense. You remember now, don't you? I can feel it. Your memory's coming back. That's why Mom told you to come back. Why the will said I was waiting. Because I am. I've been waiting for you to finally remember what happened. And suddenly, like a dam breaking, Mara did remember. August 1998. She and Jacob in the orchard. Their father had been sick. Cancer. Though they didn't use that word around the children, the orchard was failing. No apples that summer, barely any blossoms in spring, their mother crying over bills, their father too weak to work. The family farm that had sustained them for generations collapsing around them. Jacob had been the one to find it first. The hole in the ground between the trees, the ancient well that shouldn't have been there because nobody remembered digging a well in the orchard. He'd called Mara to come see, had been peering down into darkness, saying he could hear something moving down there. And Mara had looked and had seen something. Not water, not earth. Something alive, something old, something that pulsed with a light that hurt to look at directly. What is it? Jacob had whispered. I don't know. Then the trees had moved. Their roots had burst from the ground like grasping fingers, had wrapped around Jacob's ankles, pulling him toward the well. And Mara had grabbed him, had tried to pull him back. But the roots were too strong, too many. And Jacob had looked at her with eyes that were terrified, but also resigned, like he'd already accepted what was happening. It's okay, he'd said. Let go, Mara. It'll be okay. No, I won't let it take you. But she had. The roots had been so strong, and she'd been so small. And eventually her hands had slipped from Jacob's, and he'd fallen into the well, and the earth had closed over him, and the trees had gone still again. And Mara had run back to the house screaming, had told her mother Jacob was gone, had not been able to explain how or why because her 12-year-old mind couldn't process what she'd seen, couldn't make sense of trees that moved, and wells that swallowed children, and choices she'd made in that terrible moment when she'd let go of her brother's hands. Standing in the orchard now, 27 years later, Mara sank to her knees as the full memory crashed over her. She'd let him go. She'd let the trees take him. And then she'd buried the memory because living with it was impossible. You remember now, Jacob's voice said, and it wasn't angry or accusing, just sad. You've always remembered. You just hid it from yourself. I'm sorry, Mara sobbed. I'm so sorry. I should have held on. I should have saved you. You couldn't have saved me. The orchard was dying, Mara. The trees needed a sacrifice. Someone to nourish the roots, to heal the poison Dad had put in the soil. They would have taken someone eventually. Better me than Mom or Dad or you. That's not better. You were 8 years old. I know, but it was my choice. In that moment, when the roots grabbed me, I could have fought harder. I could have screamed for help, but I felt what the orchard needed, and I let it take me. I thought it would save the family, save the farm. But it didn't. The trees stopped producing. The farm failed anyway. You died for nothing. No, Jacob said. And now his voice was closer, more focused. Mara looked up and saw him standing between the trees. Not solid, not quite there, but visible, 8 years old, wearing his red t-shirt, looking exactly as he had that last day. I didn't die. I transformed. I became part of the orchard. My life force healed the poison, cleared the soil. The trees stopped bearing fruit because they were bearing me instead, growing me, keeping me, making me into something new. Show me, Mara whispered. If you're here, if you're real, show me what you become. Jacob smiled, and it was his real smile. the gap-toothed grin she remembered. Then he raised his arms and the trees around them began to glow. Soft green light emanated from their trunks, their branches, spreading through the orchard like a network of veins. And Mara could see it. Jacob's presence woven through every tree, his consciousness distributed across the entire grove, alive in a way that transcended the normal boundaries of life and death. "This is what I am now," Jacob said. "Not dead, not gone, just different. And I've been waiting, Mara, waiting for you to come back, waiting for you to remember, because I need you to make a choice." "What choice?" "The orchard is dying again, slowly but surely, without care, without attention, without someone to tend it. And I'm dying with it. I can feel my consciousness fading, my connection weakening. Soon, I'll be gone for real, dissolved back into the earth, forgotten. What can I do? Stay. Take care of the orchard. Let it heal properly this time, without chemicals, with patience and care. Give it time to recover. And in recovering, give me time to solidify, to become permanent. Or leave. Sell the property. Let someone tear down the trees. Release me into whatever comes after. But make a choice, Mara. Don't just abandon me again." "I didn't abandon you, didn't you? You ran from here the moment you could, refused to visit, tried to forget I ever existed. That's abandonment, Mara. That's choosing yourself over me." The words stung because they were true. Mara had been running for 27 years, and she'd called it self-preservation, called it moving on, called it anything but what it really was: guilt and cowardice, and an inability to face what she'd lost. "What happens if I stay?" Mara asked. "If I take care of the orchard, then I remain. Part of the trees, conscious, aware, watching over the property, watching over you. A different kind of family, but family nonetheless. And if I leave, then I fade. And eventually, I cease to be anything at all, which might be mercy, or might be a second death. I don't know. But it's your choice, Mara. I can't make it for you." Jacob's form was beginning to fade as dawn approached, the green light dimming. "I have to go now. The orchard only lets me manifest at night, in the hours between dark and dawn. But I'll be here tomorrow night if you want to talk more. Or not, if you decide to leave. Either way, thank you for finally remembering. Thank you for finally seeing me again." He disappeared, and Mara was alone in the orchard as the sun rose, painting the twisted branches gold and orange, making everything look almost normal, almost beautiful. She spent the day thinking. Called her boss, explained she'd need more time to settle her mother's estate. Called her landlord, said she might be away for a while. And she researched organic orchard care, soil remediation, native pollinators. If she was going to do this, she'd do it right. Mrs. Chen came by in the afternoon, brought tea and cookies, sat on the porch with Mara. "You saw him," Mrs. Chen said. It wasn't a question. "You knew? Your mother told me everything before she died. How Jacob had given himself to save the orchard. How the trees had taken him but not killed him. How he existed in some state between life and death. Consciousness distributed through the roots and branches. She'd known all along, Mara. She'd seen it happen. But she never told anyone, because who would believe her? Who would understand? Why didn't she stay? Why didn't she take care of the orchard if she knew Jacob was still there? She tried. For years, she tried. But it was too painful. Every day in that house, every moment near those trees, knowing her son was there but unable to hold him, unable to mother him in any normal way. It broke her, Mara. The knowing without being able to fix it. Eventually, she stopped going into the orchard, stopped trying, and Jacob started to fade. But she left it to me, because she thought you were stronger, thought you could bear what she couldn't, or maybe because she wanted you to have the choice she'd made for you when you were 12. Stay or go, save Jacob or save yourself. That's a terrible burden to put on a child. Yes, But you're not a child anymore. And this time, the choice is really yours. That night, Mara went back to the orchard. Jacob appeared as before, materialized between the trees at 3:47 a.m. exactly. "You came back," he said, and she could hear hope in his voice. "I need to understand something," Mara said. "When this happened, when the orchard took you, did it give you a choice? Could you have refused?" Jacob was quiet for a moment. "Yes and no. The orchard needed someone, but it couldn't force someone to stay. I chose to go. I felt what it needed, and I thought—" He trailed off. "You thought what?" "I thought it would make Dad proud. He loved this orchard so much. Loved the tradition, the history. I thought if I saved it, if I kept it alive, I'd be a hero. I'd matter." "Jacob, you were 8. You were already a hero. You already mattered. But I wanted to matter in a big way. And this was the biggest way I could imagine. Becoming the orchard, saving the family, living forever as long as the trees stood." He looked at her with eyes that held too much knowledge for an 8-year-old, even one who'd been 8 for 27 years. "I didn't understand what I was giving up. I didn't understand that living forever in one place meant never growing up anywhere else. I thought I was making a noble sacrifice. Really, I was just a scared kid trying to fix something that wasn't my responsibility to fix." "I'm sorry," Mara said. "I'm sorry you felt like you had to save us. I'm sorry the adults in your life let you think that was your job." "Will you stay?" Jacob asked. "Will you take care of the orchard?" Mara looked at the trees, at their twisted branches and barren limbs, at the 5 acres of broken dreams and buried children. And she thought about her life in Boston, her apartment, her job, her careful routine that had kept her safe from remembering, from feeling, from living too fully, because living fully meant risking loss. "Yes," she said, "I'll stay. But on one condition." "What?" "You stop thinking of yourself as stuck here. You're not a sacrifice or a hero or a tragedy. You're my brother. And whether you're in trees or in heaven or in my memory, that's what you are. And I'm going to take care of this orchard, not because you need me to, but because I need to. Because I need to do something good with all the years I've wasted running. Does that make sense?" Jacob smiled. "Yeah, that makes sense." Mara stayed. She quit her job, sublet her apartment, moved permanently into the old house on Millbrook Road. She spent her days learning about organic farming, about soil health, about the slow, patient work of healing land that had been poisoned by good intentions and bad choices. The orchard didn't recover quickly. It took 2 years before the first tree bloomed again, 3 years before she harvested her first apples. But slowly, gradually, the orchard came back to life. The trees straightened slightly, their branches reaching up instead of down. Green returned to gray. And Jacob, present in the roots and branches, became more vivid, more solid, more able to maintain himself even as dawn approached. Mrs. Chen passed away when Mara had been back for 4 years. At the funeral, her daughter told Mara that Mrs. Chen's last words had been, "Tell Mara she chose right. Tell her Jacob is happy." Mara never married, never had children. She dated occasionally, but found it hard to explain to potential partners why she spent every night from 3:47 a.m. until dawn, walking through the orchard, talking to trees that sometimes talked back. Most people thought she was eccentric at best, disturbed at worst. She didn't mind. She had Jacob, and she had the orchard. And that was a kind of family, even if it looked strange from the outside. When Mara was 63, she woke one morning to find the orchard in full bloom. Not just budding, but exploding with flowers. Every tree covered in white and pink blossoms, more abundant than any bloom the orchard had ever produced. She went outside and found Jacob there, visible even in daylight for the first time, standing solid and real among the trees. "What's happening?" she asked. "I'm leaving," he said. "Or transforming again? I don't know which, but I can feel it. The orchard doesn't need me anymore. It's healed. And I think it's time for me to move on to whatever comes next. Will I see you again? I don't know. Maybe. If there's something after this. Or maybe this was all there was. And I got to spend 41 years as an orchard with my sister taking care of me. And that's pretty good, really. I'll miss you. I'll miss you too. But Mara, thank you for staying, for remembering, for choosing me even when it would have been easier to choose yourself. You saved me, even though you thought you'd failed me. You gave me a life, even if it wasn't the life I would have chosen. And that matters. He faded as the sun rose higher, but this time Mara didn't feel the loss as devastation. She felt it as completion, as a circle closing, as a story finally reaching its proper ending. The orchard continued to thrive after Jacob left. Mara hired help, taught young people from town how to care for the trees organically, turned the property into a community orchard where families could come to pick apples in the fall. She never told anyone about Jacob. That was their story, private and sacred. But she made sure the orchard honored his memory by being what he'd wanted it to be: alive, thriving, a place of growth and abundance. When Mara died at 78 peacefully in her sleep in the old farmhouse, she was buried in the town cemetery beside her parents. But her will requested that an apple tree be planted on her grave, a seedling from the orchard, and everyone thought it was a poetic gesture from a woman who devoted her life to trees. Only Mrs. Chen's daughter, now elderly herself, understood the real meaning. She attended the planting and whispered to the sapling as dirt was mounded around its roots. She's with him now. However it works, wherever they are, they're together again. The tree grew faster than normal trees grow, stronger than normal trees grow. Within 5 years, it was producing the most beautiful apples anyone had ever seen, and people would come from all over to pick from Mara's tree in the cemetery. And if sometimes on August evenings, people walking past the graveyard swore they could hear voices, 2 voices, one younger and one older, laughing together among the branches. Well, that was just the wind, wasn't it? Just the rustling of leaves that sounded almost like siblings talking, like a brother and sister reunited after a lifetime apart, like love that had survived death and transformation, and 27 years of forgetting to finally become something eternal, something that would last as long as trees grow, and memories endure, and choices made in desperation bloom into understanding. In orchards across the world, trees stand that were planted by people who are gone now, their branches holding fruit that descended from fruit those hands once picked. And if you listen carefully, on certain nights, you might hear whispers between the leaves, not ghosts exactly, but presences, consciousness that found a way to remain when the body could not, love that chose transformation over ending, siblings who learned that family isn't about being together in one form, but about choosing each other across lifetimes, across states of being, across the boundary between what we call life and what we call death. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do is not let go, but hold on in new ways. Not forget, but remember differently. Not mourn what was lost, but tend carefully what remains. Growing orchards from our grief, blooming beauty from our guilt, bearing fruit from the hard choice. To stay when leaving would be easier. To remember when forgetting would be kinder. To love what we cannot hold in the ways we can still touch. With patience, with care. With roots that go deep, and branches that reach wide, and apples that taste like forgiveness. Like second chances, like a brother waiting 27 years for his sister to come home. And finally choosing to stay.